welcome back here to The Connection. Marshall Macomber here, president and founder of Think P3 in Washington, D.C., and my colleague, as always, Mary Scott Nabers, president and CEO of Strategic Partnerships in Austin. Mary, how are you?
Good morning, Marshall. I am good.
Mary, here we are today. This is episode 12 of what we're calling season 1 of the Connection podcast here. And I got to say, what a journey it's already been. We're already looking forward to season 2. We're doing season 1, and we're going to talk a little bit today about what we've seen, some best practices, some trends. Before we get there, I have to point out, for those of you who are listening or watching today, if you haven't gone to Government Market News, Gov Market News, do so. We have written over the past year, since the launch of the site, over 1,200 articles. We've touched, Mary, I think pretty much every sector of government out there, and billions, Mary, tens of billions of available funding. I don't know. It's astonishing.
It is. And just in case we've got some listeners today who were not here on the launch day when we explained our objective, I think it's important to say that what we're trying to do is be somewhat of a visionary because we are living in changing times that it's occurring all around us so fast that it's almost hard to keep up. And Gov Market News was created for only 2 segments of the economy: companies that transact business in the government market space and public officials who manage our government market space. And so everything we talk about here that we've talked about for this whole first season has been to help provide valuable information for those 2 segments. Just in case they don't know what we did in season 1, I want to just point that out, Marshall.
I want to take, when I was taking some notes and we looked over the previous 11 episodes, there were kind of 3 Ds that came to mind. I like to do things in threes, when you write a good speech. I came away with disruption, decision makers, and the driving issues of the day. That's what I took away. We Vertiports, P3s, Puerto Rico, mayors, the big issues of the day: housing, equity, broadband, ports. Mary, what were some of your takeaways from some of these first issues or first episodes out there?
I think it's also important for us to explain that we talk about, things like politics and the disruptive political world that we live in right now has impacted procurement and partnerships. And so we talk about that. And we talk about politics in that we have never, ever lived in a time where so much money has been appropriated by Congress for state and local government to reform the infrastructure, fix your water, fix your clean air, improve your public transit stations, and deal with really, really tough issues like homelessness and housing and everything like that. So we covered the waterfront pretty much, but we've still got lots of waterfront to cover.
I want to make sure to go back when we highlight for some of our listeners and viewers what we talked about. I want to talk about just a moment what's happened since we launched the podcast back in January in the news. A couple of key things. Mary, you mentioned, of course, all the funding that's available. There was that Politico article. Remember, I know we might put these up on the screen during this Politico. $1.6 trillion in available funding and tax incentives out there. But yet, Mary, only $1.4 trillion as of about a month ago had actually already been spent.
Right. And that's the reason, Marshall, on one of our podcasts in season 1, we gave all of the best tips to city and county and state officials who need that money, who have to somewhat compete for it. And so we explained that your chances are so much higher if you partner with another local government entity, maybe a university or even a nonprofit. But if a city and county go together, your chances are doubled or maybe tripled that you'll get that funding. And then we explained a lot about, even though there's a trillion, 4 left, that money runs out in 2026. It has to be allocated, or the government just simply takes it back. And what a shame that would be for cities and counties and states that are really suffering with needing projects launched.
You know, the needs are always going to continue. I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill here this morning when we're recording this, which the noise in the background here, but I think that noise speaks to all the
Right.
energy that keeps coming from Washington, state capitals like Austin. One of the biggest stories, every front page news, if they still have those anymore, every news feed out there, was the collapse of the Key Bridge in Baltimore. Right, that's a
Right.
huge story nationwide, and then the closure of the port of Baltimore. I'd note that just this morning, I think that the state Corps of Engineers and the feds have said the shipping channel, a little less than 3 months later, is now entirely open, so ships can go back in and out of the ports. But it put the notion of major infrastructure, that big bridge, which is not even 50 years old,
Mm,
collapsed, and now they're going to have to rebuild this bridge.
right.
You know, it puts this in the forefront of Americans' minds. But I think, to your point about partnerships, if we had more public-private partnerships, more collaboration with public and private, I think we could get these things like the bridge built faster. What do you think?
I totally agree. And Marshall, we had Chris Ward, former
Mm-hmm.
court director in New York, New Jersey, talk to us about all of the upcoming opportunities that are available right now at ports. And it's amazing. And they have lots and lots of money. They have billions to spend, and they need light rail, and they need new storage, and they need upgraded technology. And so businesses in a state that has a port have a tremendous new lucrative market out there that they need to not overlook.
I'm going to go back to take a look at some of these early podcasts we did here. The first one we did out the gate, and you mentioned that was on Vertiports. We had
Right.
Karen Moore Lund, who works for Ferrovial, and they are out developing this network. And I would argue it's sort of a new form of airports, almost a distributed system of
Hmm.
air transport across the country as we see our economy continue to move to a more distributed phase, rather centralized. The, the what that means for cities and the availability of air service and air cargo to city directly into the center of the city and to rural areas as well. This to me looks like something I think mayors, county governments, they need to get on board with this. Don't you agree?
Totally. And in that same podcast, we also talked about all of the things that are happening at airports, all of the opportunities for collaboration. But who would have thought 10 years ago we would be talking about air taxis, and we would be explaining that a lot of the new buildings in the metropolitan cities are putting helipads on top of them. That's how convinced they are that this is all going to happen. It's sort of like electric cars. 15 years ago, we were not even thinking about all the charging stations that would be installed and the billions that would be spent on electric cars and making it easy for them. So we are living in a changing world, and it's I'm so glad you're in DC and can keep us up to speed on everything happening there. But most of the change is really occurring at the state and local levels of government.
And it's happening so
Yeah.
quickly, and every mayor, county commissioner, city manager, CFO, they're all under intense pressure to meet these. We talk about housing. You know, we're going to get to that in a minute. We're going to lead off season 2 here of the podcast with housing issues.
And talking about what are cities doing. They've got the homeless issue. They've got all the upgrades to roads, and transportation and light rail through the cities. And what are they doing to deal with those issues? And which funding program can they go through to get funding? And we pointed out, and I want to say it one more time because I don't think that a lot of people realize, but much of this funding and almost all of the new proposed funding is going to have a component in there that says part of it has to be private sector investment. And so it's going to force cities and counties and states to reach out and become partners with private sector contractors. And I'll just say one more thing and then quit talking. But it's because there's not enough public money to continue what we need to do. Marshall, we don't have a single airport now in the 10 largest and busiest airports in the world, and 8 of those airports are located in China. And America has got to overcome that. We've got to fix our ports, our airports. I mean, we've just got a lot left to do.
Broadband. Think about all the money coming down the pike. Housing and ports and airports, broadband. Right?
Right.
That's the next superhighway. We have the information superhighway connecting every community, especially coming out of COVID. We know the importance of all the billions coming from the federal government, but that's not to your point about the private sector. There's entities out there right now that can help these cities and counties, especially those that are newly empowered to be able to run their own municipal broadband systems, whatever that might look like, to be able to fund and finance those things if they're unhappy with the service they have now. Maybe they don't have any service now.
That's true. And Marshall, I had a call a couple of weeks ago from a small, mid-sized, well, not even a mid-sized city, a small city. And it was from the city manager, and he said, "We need help." And we work with public officials. We don't ever charge government anything, but we worked with him to say, "What's the problem? Let's look at what you need." And he said, My city is now located 14 miles from the Tesla plant that's going to employ thousands, and my city is 12 miles from a new semiconductor factory that's going in. And we don't have enough water, we don't have enough roads, we don't have schools, we can't, we don't have enough health care, we can't take care of any of that. And he said, we're sort of in a rural area here. What do we do? And so I think it's real important that we explain again that every single state has a statewide organization that does nothing but help rural communities get funding and understand where the resources are. And they are there to be advocates. So I think that's really important for public officials to know.
One of my key takeaways from all our discussions, I'm thinking about the mayor of Oklahoma City, the mayor of Arlington, Texas, too, and the P3 director of the Puerto Rico Office of Public-Private Partnerships. One of the key takeaways from those conversations was not just partnership, but it's the collaboration with their
Right,
local organizations. You got to go to your states and figure out where the funding is. There's so much help out there, but to partner with those local organizations, think about your university, your college, a high school, the school district. To your point, those partnerships, communities can no longer do things in silos because the projects are just simply too complex. And one way to help pull that apart is to build that community support by partnering in their local community, and then that helps build community support to get, first of all, it gets you a better project usually because it
right.
better meets the needs of a community. And then secondarily, you're building additional support with your local stakeholders, your local community, and your elected officials.
I loved it, Marshall. When we talked to the city of Arlington's
Mm-hmm.
mayor, he kept saying, if you've got a visionary product or a service that we should hear about, I want you just to come right now and talk to us about it. After the podcast, I said to him, but you realize it's very, very hard for a private sector person to get in because your people are too busy to take meetings. It's hard for them to break in. And he said, well, nothing's easy. They just need to stick with it. They need to go to whoever is the oversight, the public uh, works person, or the transportation person, or the water division. And if they literally cannot get through, they need to come to my office. And if they have to just sit there and wait, we need to hear from them, because those are the people we're going to work with. I thought that was interesting.
I want to hear too, as we look into season 2 going forward, we're going to talk about, I've got a list of things we're going to, housing, water, maybe even the grid, some sustainability. I loved
Artificial
your idea.
intelligence. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence because,
AI.
but I think it's really important for people to understand. We're also going to talk about sustainability because
Hmm.
that's where there's billions of dollars. And what does that mean? How do they
That's right.
go and find that money? We're about to go into hurricane season.
Mm.
And I heard yesterday from a couple of climatologists that this will be the worst weather event season we have ever seen. I heard I heard him say Texas is prime for the odds, and he gave the percentages, and I'm not going to do that because I'll get them wrong. But the percentages are extremely high for a level 4 hurricane to come on land in Texas. I don't, we've not had that in decades. But this is going to be a bad year. So we're going to talk about a lot of what do we need to do for sustainability to keep from flooding, to keep from everything that happens destroying homes even more.
And so much. There's a piece the other day I read that said where the U.S. population is growing fastest happens to be, to your point, in states like Texas and Florida that are
Yep.
most vulnerable
Yes.
to those major storms. And of course, people are seeing when they get to these states, when they either get there or their families are growing, communities are growing, their insurance costs are going through the roof as well. And that's also
Yeah.
the same thing when governments look at trying to build more sustainable infrastructure projects. In other words, those that can recover more, that can hold up during these extreme weather events, heat,
Right.
hurricanes, snow, whatever it might be, cold in Texas with the grid,
Yeah.
but also to recover more quickly, right? So they're not, so the grid doesn't go down in the face of these extreme weather events, which are coming more quickly.
High demand areas, yeah. And Marshall, let's as we're closing down here, let's make a plea for people to
Yes,
reach out to us. What do you want to hear about? What do you need to hear about? And that will help us plan season 2 because this has been great fun. I've really enjoyed it.
we're trying to look around the curve.
Hmm.
What's coming? Folks always want to know. That's America. We're always looking to tomorrow. We're optimistic by nature and outlook. What is coming around the curve? We need to know, and we want to talk to and highlight the leaders,
Yes.
the people, like we had the mayor of Oklahoma City in Texas, in Arlington, Texas. Who are the leaders? What do they have to say? What best practices do they have to offer others in those roles today? Because
Yeah.
it's a tough job. It is a
Yeah,
tough
we're trying to
job.
be the connection
Yep.
between the two most important sectors in a world that is changing and in a marketplace that is now the largest marketplace in the world. So, with that,
Well,
let's
Mary, I'm gonna throw you a question that you didn't expect here at the end of this thing because that always makes it fun. Tell me something you learned that you did not expect from season one.
something I learned from season
Yes,
one.
and that you did not anticipate that you would learn.
Well, and you have to understand that I live in a world where every single day
I know.
of every week we are looking at what's happening and so forth.
Hmm.
But I guess that the strangest thing to me is that there's so much money
Hmm.
left. And
Mm.
so I heard from a lot of experts about how do you get the money. I already knew that public officials are short staffed. They are dealing with other issues and they don't really know how to go about it. But I loved hearing not only from people who had contacted us about what's the best way, what
Hmm.
are the best practices for going after that funding. We don't want it to go away before we've fixed some of our problems.
Yeah. One of my big takeaways from season one was, we often hear that elected officials are kind of overwhelmed by the either amount of funding or opportunities.
Mhm.
But I still see that there are many who are quietly and sometimes under the radar, sometimes too far under the radar. They're pushing forward and they're
Mhm.
looking forward and they're
Yeah,
getting things done.
yeah,
And I think in really, really, really smart ways. And again, I think those are the types of folks that we want to have on the show in the future as we start season 2 with housing. Reach out to us here on the connection and at Gov Market News. We want to hear your ideas. I want to say thank you to the Government Market News team, Dave, Caroline, Gracie, Austin. This is it's a terrific undertaking we have here. It's very, very exciting, and I think the second half of this year, there's no telling what we're going to come across. Election year, it's an
yeah,
election year. We
yeah,
got to rematch up
yeah.
and how politics matters, how it impacts this space is going to be really interesting. Mary, any other final comments here?
I think that'll do it for me, Marshall.
All right, y'all
Looking
join
forward to
us.
season 2.
Great. Thanks for joining, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.